People are protesting the current cost of living in one of the most stable economies in the world, which is now in disarray. According to reports, inflation was over 10% in September, while food prices are rising at their fastest rate in more than 40 years. At this point, the government is supposed to step in and assist the struggling populace, but the new administration has been so incompetent over the past few years. We would have assumed it was in a developing nation still figuring things out, but this is happening in the United Kingdom, the fourth largest economy in the world and historically one of the most stable. Let's find out how we got here and if the UK still has any hope. Simply put, Liz Truss, the British Prime Minister, did not cause the country's economy to collapse. They were awful before Theresa May joined office and bad before Boris Johnson came to power. Furthermore, they existed before the nation's June 2016 vote to leave the EU. The fact that things weren't great was one of the reasons many chose to leave the EU. The truth is that Britain's economy has been battling to recover from the 2008 global financial crisis, which also brought an end to the political agreement that supported the nation during what seemed to be Tony Blair's golden years as Prime Minister. From that point forward, public services declined, wages stagnated, and people naturally. However, many things can be true at once in politics. Frustrated Brexit supporters can point out that things weren't perfect in Britain before Brexit. They can contend that a future Prime Minister did not need to lower taxes to leave the EU because there was no information regarding how she intended to pay for those reductions. They can also point out that Boris Johnson, Britain's first post-Brexit Prime Minister, did the opposite from 2019 to 2022, raising taxes to pay for increased spending on senior care in the National Health Service despite having pledged to end austerity during the campaign that resulted in the largest Tory election victory in 30 years. The point is that doing stupidly, to use a phrase from Barack Obama, is still stupid whether you're inside or outside the EU. Inside the EU, you have the option of pursuing a balanced budget, as Germany does, or not, as Greece did. And before Brexit, Britain was fully capable of self-harming catastrophes. Truss' ludicrous self-immolation is most closely compared to Black Wednesday in 1992 when John Major's administration fought to retain the pound inside the framework that existed before the European single currency. Britain's previous attempt to reject economic reality failed, and in the process, it lost billions of pounds in the pursuit of anti-American, anti-European policies. Even if Britain has been experiencing economic gloom since the global financial crisis, assigning blame to that cause seems oversimplified. The more difficult reality is that Britain has been failing for even longer. In actuality, the management of Britain has been appallingly poor since the turn of the century. Its military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, its regulatory framework during the Great Financial Crisis, its political elite during the Brexit vote, and its institutional machinery during the epidemic are all examples of its repeated failures. Westminster gave Scotland more authority to stifle secessionism, but the opposite result was observed. Without providing any information on how it would leave the EU if voters choose to do so, it held a referendum. Of course, other nations also had hardships during the pandemic, but the United Kingdom's vaccine research effort will be credited with saving millions of lives on a global scale. Unlike some regressing democracies, Britain's leaders do not advocate annulling election results. Despite the recent upheaval and humiliation, the nation is still as prosperous as France. However, the overall picture is not favorable. In contrast to France, secessionist nationalisms are just one referendum away from success, and the ruling class no longer appears to have a clear plan of action. Claims of collapse and revival before and after Europe, before and after Thatcher, can be quickly disproven by examining Britain's economic development from 1945. According to data I was given by the London-based think tank Centre for European Reform, Britain's average GDP growth rate, in real terms, outside of what was then known as the European Common Market from 1945 to 1973 was 2.8%. This decreased to 2.3% between 1974 and 2008 when Britain was a full member of the European Economic Community, the organization's predecessor to the EU. Between the financial crisis of 2009 and the Brexit of 2019, this further decreased to 1.3%. In other words, Britain's growth rate, like that of the rest of the West, has demonstrated a long-term slowing regardless of participation in Europe. However, when measured against other nations' growth rates, Britain's performance in Europe appears stronger than outside of it. Outside, its economy expanded half as swiftly as that of Germany and France. That's it for today. Please share and subscribe and press the bell button for more updates.